Chapter 5. The Spark of the Old Crew. Henry rubbed the back of his neck, his knuckles catching on the stiff collar of his waistcoat as he groaned, struggling to stand up. Noah reached down, gripping the portmaster beneath his arm to steady his balance, while Ethan picked up the heavy, iron-rimmed ledger from the damp floorboards. Henry stood blinking against the glare of the lantern, his eyes darting between the two teenagers before shifting to the open door of the captain's quarters behind them. "Don't give me that innocent look, Spark," Henry muttered, his voice sharp as his head gave a sudden, involuntary jerk to the left. He straightened his waistcoat, his breathing finally slowing down to a normal pace. "You two are supposed to be checking the mooring lines at slip 11. Instead, I find you lurking in the belly of a retired vessel. Your father would have my head if he knew I let you wander into the old Commodore's sanctuary." Ethan swallowed hard, his fingers pressing against the stiff, folded parchment hidden inside his linen shirt. He knew he could lie. He could tell Henry they were just looking for dry rags or checking the deck seals, but looking into the tired, weathered face of the man who had fought monsters alongside his father, Ethan made a split-second choice. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the old vellum document, holding it out into the narrow beam of the lantern light. "We weren't just exploring, Uncle Henry," Ethan said softly, his voice echoing in the tight corridor. "We found this. It was wedged behind the casing of Captain Vega's nightstand drawer. It has his official naval seal." Henry froze. The irritated look vanished from his features, replaced by a sudden, intense seriousness. He snatched the document from Ethan's hand, his fingers surprisingly steady as he unfolded the brittle edges. He held the map closer to the brass lantern, his dark eyes scanning the meticulous grid lines, the ink drawings of the uncharted reefs, and the elegant looping handwriting at the bottom of the page. "By the saints," Henry whispered, his breath catching in his throat. His head twitched violently, a sharp, jerky movement that showed his deep agitation. He touched the cracked blue wax seal with the tip of his thumb. "This is Arthur's personal hand, the Lost Vault of DeLeon. I remember him talking about a sister stash, a secondary treasury that the Spanish crown had hidden before the hurricane hit Port Argyle, but we all thought it was a myth. We thought the ocean swallowed it whole 20 years ago. The map says it's unreachable by the standard line," Noah added, stepping closer to peer over Henry's shoulder. "What does that mean, Henry? If Captain Vega knew where it was, why did he leave it undisturbed?" "Because Arthur was a naval scholar, boy," Henry said, his voice rising with a strange, nostalgic energy that Ethan had never heard from the quiet portmaster before. He traced a line across the ink-drawn reefs. "He used the old Royal Navy grid calculations, a complex mathematical matrix that required tracking the shifts in the trade winds and the deep lunar tides. Back then, the illusion didn't have the hull, reinforcements to survive the shallow coral teeth of these specific coordinates. But now—" Henry stopped, his gaze lifting from the parchment to look around the dark, solid timber frame of the ship's interior. A slow, knowing grin spread across his face, revealing a glimpse of the reckless, energetic young man his father used to tell stories about. "Now, she's been completely rebuilt," Ethan finished for him, his hazel eyes flaring with that dangerous, inherited hunger for adventure. "The hull is watertight, the rigging is pristine. You've been maintaining her for this exact reason, haven't you?" Henry didn't answer immediately. He folded the map with extreme care, tucking it into his own coat pocket before looking the two boys dead in the eye. "If we do this, we do it right. No half-cocked midnight runs. We need a crew that knows how to handle these sails without alerting the entire town, and we need them by tomorrow night." Chapter 6. The Secret Roll. Call. The heavy metallic tang of melted iron and the sharp scent of freshly shaved oak sawdust always lingered longest in the dark corners of the Port Argyle shipwright yards. The following evening, long after the heavy hammers of the day workers had fallen silent, the back alleyways of the shipyard were illuminated only by the faint, silver reflection of the moon on the water. Ethan stood in the shadows of a half-finished sloop hull, his back pressed against the raw timber frame as he counted the quiet footsteps approaching through the fog. "They're all here, Spark," Noah whispered, stepping out of the darkness first. He carried a heavy burlap sack over his shoulder, the clinking of small iron blocks and extra rigging lines muffled by the thick canvas. Behind Noah came the secret assembly. Ethan watched them closely as they gathered in a tight circle beneath. The skeletal ribs of the unfinished ship. These weren't random street urchins. These were the sons and daughters of Maiter's finest dock workers, shipwrights, and sailmakers. They were kids who had crawled through cargo holds before they could walk, possessing a raw, practical knowledge of the sea that no wealthy merchant could ever buy. "This had better be worth the risk, Ethan Hicks," a sharp, commanding voice cut. Through the damp air, Maeve Miller stepped into the center of the circle, pulling back the heavy linen hood of her weather-beaten cloak. At 15, the daughter of the island's chief shipwright carried herself with the fierce, independent confidence of a veteran officer. Her dark brown eyes flashed with a competitive fire in the moonlight, and her fingers were heavily calloused. From a lifetime of handling coarse naval hemp and brass navigation tools, she adjusted the leather straps of a heavy canvas satchel slung across her chest, which protectively housed her father's private navigation charts and a polished brass sextant. "It's worth it, Maeve," Ethan said, stepping forward, the restless energy humming in his veins. "We have Commodore Vega's original grid map, the secondary treasury. We have a way out, and we have the illusion." A loud, theatrical gasp echoed from the back of the group as Barnaby Finch pushed his way to the front, nearly tripping over a stack of iron barrel hoops. The 16-year-old logistics apprentice looked entirely out of place in his meticulously kept emerald green wool waistcoat, though it was currently smudged with a bit of black harbor grease. He was frantically scribbling on a heavily overstuffed parchment clipboard with a stained quill, his expressive eyes wide with absolute panic. "The illusion?" Barnaby hissed dramatically, his voice pitching high with anxiety as his ginger hair caught the faint moonlight. "Are you completely out of your mind, Spark? That vessel requires a minimum complement of 20 fully trained, able-bodied seamen just to manage the foremast lines. The rigging tension calculations alone will be an absolute mathematical nightmare. And the rations. Do you have any idea how many barrels of salted beef and fresh water we need to secure just to survive a 3-day run against the trade winds? We will starve, or worse, we will capsize before we even clear the outer reef." "We aren't going alone, Barnaby," Noah said firmly, placing a heavy grounding hand on the thin boy's trembling shoulder. "Port Master Henry is commanding the wheel. He's guiding us." The mention of Twitch's real name instantly silenced the skeptical murmurs among the other minor dock kids in the circle. If the harbor master himself was backing this expedition, it wasn't a foolish children's heist anymore. It was a real voyage. Maeve stepped directly into Ethan's space, her gaze locked onto his hazel eyes, searching for any sign of hesitation. If Henry is navigating, then he needs someone who can actually translate Vega's naval grid math in real time under pressure. My father's maps line up with those old coordinates. I'm in, Hicks, but if Barnaby doesn't stop hyperventilating over the water barrels, I'm tossing him overboard myself. I am not hyperventilating. I am practicing administrative prudence, Barnaby shot back, defensively clutching his ledger to his chest. Ethan looked around at the small, ragtag crew of faces. They were young, they were breaking the rules, but the spark of adventure was officially lit. "Get your gear to slip 14 before the midnight watch rotates," Ethan ordered quietly. "The tide is turning, and the illusion is waiting.